All right, so the Atlanta Hawks have had a very interesting offseason, and I actually made a video on them a few weeks ago before the draft where they obviously had the number one overall pick, and they picked Zacharrie Risacher, and they've had a productive offseason while having a very disappointing offseason. So a lot of teams were mad at because they're not making moves at all. So look at the Lakers right now. They've had a really weird offseason because despite needing to make some roster moves, they haven't done anything outside of drafting Dalton Connect and Bronny James and picking up JJ Redick as their new head coach. So that is a team that had a bad offseason because they weren't productive. The Hawks have been very productive. They had the number one overall pick, like I said, and they also made some roster moves, a big time roster shakeup, which I'm going to talk about in a second, by moving Dejounte Murray over to the Pelicans. But despite being productive, they still haven't gotten much done, right? So I want to give them credit, like I said, for getting Risacher, who showed some pretty good stuff in the summer league. He showed a lot in limited action, showed some flashes as a great shot creator, and obviously as a shot maker. That's what people know him for his ability to shoot the ball at a high level, and showed some pretty solid handles, which gives us a glimpse at a ton of upside as a future on-ball shot creator, like I just mentioned. And like I said, they also traded Dejounte Murray. In exchange, they got Dyson Daniels, Larry Nance Jr., EJ Liddell, and also some future first-round picks, which they do not own, but still some future draft capital. So those are good rotational pieces, and adding a number one overall pick to the roster is huge, but this does nothing to push the needle for the Hawks at all. They're in a really weird spot. It looks like there is a side of them that still wants to compete and another side that is eager to start a rebuild. When you trade away your second best player like Dejounte Murray for future draft capital and young pieces like Dyson Daniels, this is the sign of a rebuild. Yet nothing has been done with Trae Young, who will for sure generate the most return between solid rotational pieces and draft capital, but they've done nothing with him. And they also kept a lot of role players from last year's team, so like Clint Capella, DeAndre Hunter, Bogdan Bogdanovic, and Onyeka Okongwu are still on the roster. This team is too good to tank, and it doesn't make sense to just kind of have these guys sitting on the roster to have a bad season. So a part of them, like I said, still wants to win and compete, but they're not good enough to win and compete with this current roster. So you would think that they start moving pieces away to accelerate a rebuild, but they have not done that. They're still keeping these guys. They're still keeping these starters along with Trae Young. And like I said, they have a foot in like this territory where they want to commit to a rebuild. So just kind of stuck in the middle right now. A team that's kind of similar to that are the Chicago Bulls, where they should fully commit to a rebuild, but they're not doing it just yet. They're not trading away Zach LaVine. And I know a lot of that is because LaVine's trade value is in question. A lot of contenders aren't really eager to pick him because of his defense and also general lack of playoff experience. He has one playoff appearance, but it wasn't all that great. He averaged like 19 points in a first-round gentleman sweep loss against the Bucks, but kind of a similar situation where you have a team that should be going full rebuild. They're hinting at it, but they're still not moving away from like those veteran pieces, those guys who should be on contending situations like a Zach LaVine, and for Atlanta, like a Trae Young. So as I said, this team is too good to tank, but not good enough to contend. And for a team like the Hawks, your vision for success should entail getting back into championship contention, not just settling for a playoff or playing spot, especially since they gave us a glimpse of that 3 years ago. We all remember in 2021, they make the Eastern Conference Finals. They're like a couple of games away from actually getting to the finals. They were hit with injuries. Trae Young missed a few games in that series, and the Bucks beat them. But that could have potentially been a year where the Hawks, led by a very young Trae Young, could have went to the finals and possibly won a championship. But since then, their follow-up to that has been very disappointing. One of the most disappointing teams in the entire league. They've just gotten progressively worse, or have kind of stayed in the same type of situation, which is like a play-in situation over the last couple of years. They've shown us that they can win with Trae Young as their best player, but since then, they have just gotten worse, and it's been very, very rough to see. Now, the moves they made, while they're marginal, they can help them improve in some areas, so they did get slightly better from a defensive standpoint. Dyson Daniels, who they got from New Orleans, is a great great on-ball defensive player, and he does bring some solidity on offense. Good off-the-ball player, great IQ with that, so he knows when to cut. Great slasher as well. Not an amazing shooter. So if you start him along with Trae Young for some defense to kind of complement Trae Young's game, there will be some spacing issues. He shot at 31% from three last season, and he's never put up double figures yet in his career. But there's upside if he plays a larger role and if he's asked to have a big part in the Hawks offense, which he didn't do a lot with the Pelicans last season. And Risacher also has some defensive upside with his length. He's a rookie, so there's a little bit of a toss-up there. How good is he going to be in year one as a young perimeter defender? But he is an option. And there's also Nance Jr., who's a really good, sizable, versatile defensive piece off the bench. So they did get better when it comes to size, and that's going to help them a ton from a defensive standpoint, especially on the perimeter and wing. But these aren't moves that are going to get them over the hump and totally move the needle. The offensive options they have are simply just not that much. And that's going to be huge because in the Eastern Conference, teams are ran by having either great duos or trios. So if you look at the Celtics, that's Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. The Knicks, they have Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, and also now Mikal Bridges. If you look at the Bucks, that is Damian Lillard and Giannis. The Sixers, Joel Embiid, Maxey, and Paul George. And with the Heat, that is Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier, along with Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero. And let's throw in the Pacers, that is Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam. I know the fit between Dejounte Murray and Trae Young just wasn't great, but the offense didn't get any better this offseason by shipping away a really efficient scorer in Murray. They just didn't get anyone to fill that second option void. Can Bogdanovich play a bigger role in the offense, right? Maybe. He's never averaged over 18 points per game in his career. He's never got to that 20-point per game mark, but his shot volume will definitely be at its highest this coming season. So he may be able to get in that territory, but a duo of Trae Young and Bogdanovich as your top two scorers isn't really going to get you super far in the Eastern Conference, which is really deep, as I said, with the trios and duos we're seeing these other teams have, right? So they're just way too stuck in the middle right now. It should have been a no-brainer to aggressively shop trade, accelerate this rebuild, but they have not done it. Now, it's not at a total lack of effort. There have been some suitors that have rejected offers for him. The Hawks do have a pretty steep price to move away Trae Young. It is reported that the Lakers, amongst others, haven't really intensified any talks for Trae Young. And the rumor mill says that generally right now, his trade value is down. So comparing him again to Zach LaVine, where he's a really good offensive option, but contenders are kind of passive and a little concerned about bringing him in because of that lack of defense. And right now, we talked a lot about the Lakers. People kind of linked him to a lot of Lakers trade deals, right? But the issue with the Lakers getting him is, are you sure you want to pair him and Austin Reeves in a backcourt? That's going to be a nightmare defensively, and I don't mean that in a good way at all, right? So Trae Young is kind of in that category where he's this dynamic offensive option with his ability to score and shoot the ball at a very high level and pass and find other guys, one of the best passes in the league. But he's that bad from a defensive standpoint that would scare away contenders because we know perimeter defense is absolutely huge. So yes, the Hawks were productive, but it just isn't going to get them over the hump with the moves they've already made. So I just don't see there being a lot of improvement this coming season. They're just going to be mediocre, where they should be just looking to accelerate into a rebuild if they know that's going to end up being the case this coming season. So we'll see what they end up doing, and it's not off the table for them to still make a Trae Young deal happen at this point. We saw Damian Lillard get traded over to the Bucks, I think like in September or the late part of August. It was a little bit before the season got started. So there's still an opportunity for that to happen, but a very disappointing offseason. Again, not because they weren't productive, because they were, but they just did not move the needle for a team that just simply needs to either contend or get right into rebuild situation. And they had the capital and the assets to do that, but they just have not done it yet at this point.